Hello party members! Now, before I get started, I just want to point out that I finally hit over 1,000 subscribers! Thank you so much for your support. This achievement is literally all because of you. I appreciate everything you have done for me. Thank you so much. To celebrate, I'm going to be holding my very first live stream Q&A. It'll be held on Monday, the 22nd of November at 8 PM GMT, so look at what time that means in your own time zone, because I have no idea. So if you can't make it, but you have questions, please pop them in the comment section below. That way I can answer them as the Q&A goes on. I am so nervous about doing my very first live stream, but I am so excited to finally be chatting to you all in person. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Okay, so I've talked about saving money at LARP before, and I stand by that video. But there's a difference between being able to save money when you go LARPing and being able to go LARPing when you've got barely 2 coins to rub together. We've pretty much all been there. You know, life can be an expensive thing. You could have student loans, you could be living off a low income, or you could just pretty much have so many expenses you just have nothing left afterwards. Or frankly, you could have all of the above. It doesn't really matter. That doesn't mean you have to miss out on LARP. And this is how you do it. Number 1, pick your event carefully. Now, it's very tempting to pick the LARP that looks the coolest and has the biggest following. But you need to keep in mind that some of these LARPs are going to cost you an arm and a leg. And possibly a kidney. And the thing is, those prices are almost always justified. Most of them have fancy venues, accommodation, all-inclusive food, and these kind of crazy props that I couldn't afford if I tried. If that's what you want from your LARP, then you have to expect to pay the price for it. There's no way around that. And it's also important to keep in mind that if you're not able or willing to pay that high price ticket, then the LARP event you're attending is probably not going to have those things. Now, let me be 100% clear. There is no correlation at all between cheap LARPs and bad LARPs. I have been to LARPs that cost me almost nothing and had the best events of my life. You do not need big venues and fancy props to have a thrilling and engaging LARP. What I am saying is that it's not fair on the game runners for you to expect fancy accommodation and 4-course meals for every dinner when you've spent less on your ticket than a Lego advent calendar. This does, however, mean that there are loads of great LARPs out there which are more suited to those of us who are working on a much more tight budget. Your first option is essentially to see if there's any LARPs you can attend for free. One thing LARPs always need more of are NPCs, and some LARPs will offer for you to attend your LARP for free if you NPC for them. Now, the downside of this means that you won't be able to play a character, at least not one that you've designed for yourself. You will have to sort of play in roles that the game runners need you to play in. But you do get to take part in these amazing games. And depending on the game, your accommodation and food are prioritised and may even be free as well. If you really, really, really want to play, then you need to think about all of the elements that are going to make up your LARP event experience. Where are you going to sleep? Are you going to need a tent? Are you going to book a hotel? Is the LARP going to be providing accommodation for you? If accommodation is provided, that may increase the actual cost, as may will, booking a hotel. However, on the other hand, if you are going to be using a tent, can you afford a tent? Do you already have one? Is there a way you can borrow one to make things more cost effective? How are you going to eat? Is food provided? Is that going to incur an extra cost? If not, what is your budget for food? You need to eat properly at LARP events. Just because instant noodles and sandwiches are cheap doesn't mean that they are going to be suitable for keeping your energies up. You need to plan more carefully because there's so much more food out there that would be suitable that isn't going to break your budget. And then once you've had a look at these elements, start looking for a LARP which is ideal for you with the things you need. Start by having a look for LARP events online. There are so many places where you can find different LARP events. Literally typing LARP events into Google comes up with a long list of different places where LARP events are advertised, or even LARP events being advertised themselves. Stick your country in there and it becomes a lot easier. Facebook is great for this. I tend to float about the UK LARP events page, which is really good for obviously LARP events in my country. And it also caters for a variety of budgets. And I also love the info on English speaking Blockbuster LARPs Facebook page. And that is because it lists English speaking LARPs all over the globe, even in countries where English is not the first language. However, keeping in mind that international travel is almost definitely going to add more cost to your LARP event, which brings me on to my next point. Number 2. Be travel smart. Your travel costs are going to be one of the biggest chunks of your LARP budget. You need to be able to get to the event and, more importantly, get home afterwards. If everything goes wrong, you at least want to end up in your own bed. The best option to save the most money is to find a LARP event that is close to you already. Unless you live somewhere where travel is cheap, and I know those places exist, but it's certainly not where I live, then you are going to need to travel as little as possible to save as much money as you can. Now, we all have a different definition of how far away is. I know in some countries a 2-hour commute is seen as pretty short, where in my country it's a lifetime. So, be realistic about how long you're really willing to travel for a LARP event. And be mindful of how much that is going to cost you. Look at all your different options. Traveling by car might be considered more cost effective if you own your own car and know how much your fuel costs are going to be. Only you will be able to say whether that is the most cost effective option for you. If you don't drive like me, then there are other options. Hiring a private taxi or an Uber might be fine if you're not having to travel very far. You can probably take more with you than if you were traveling by public transport. And there is the comfort of COVID safety as well, when you're only having to travel with one other person instead of being exposed to an entire busload of strangers. However, if you're traveling even slightly further than a couple of miles from you, then traveling by private taxi might not be your best option. It does tend to ramp costs up. And to add to that, the amount you could be spending on a private taxi may vary depending on the day you're traveling or even the time of day you're traveling. And that's what makes public transport a better option sometimes, because at least that way you can predict how much you're going to need to be spending when you actually are on the move. I have ridden many a train to many a LARP event and generally found it to be a rather straightforward, simple experience. There are downsides, however. Because LARPs are often held in the middle of nowhere, you generally need a secondary option to get you from wherever your public transport has dumped you to the actual site. Sometimes there's the option of getting another form of public transport, i.e. if you've taken a train to a certain place, you can then get a bus from there to wherever your event is going to be. However, if there's nowhere like a bus stop even close to your site, then you're going to need to look at other options. If you don't have a wonderful friend who is willing to come and pick you up, then essentially what you're going to have to do is work out how much extra it's going to cost you to get all of your things from that bus stop to that site. And that might involve calling a taxi. So it might be worth considering that at that extra point, is it worth spending the extra bit of money, or is it too costly to go to this event at all? How much your travel costs are going to be can literally make or break your event. There are so many LARPs I would have loved to attend, but couldn't because literally their events are held in sites in the middle of nowhere, and I can't justify the cost of spending the money to get there. And unfortunately that does mean that I've missed out on some really great events. But that's life, unfortunately. Okay, number 3, cut costs on your costume. There is no reason at all for you to be paying through the nose for a LARP costume. Costumes are always the bit of LARP that everybody looks forward to. That's why no matter who you meet, every single LARPer is going to have some form of Pinterest board, drawings, or even just a massive catalogue of various LARP pieces that they have in their home. I once went to someone's house who literally had paper scattered everywhere just with sketches of LARP costumes. The downside of having all these ideas though does mean that you can burn a hole in your pocket trying to find all the money to have these amazing costumes. And it's just not necessary. If you have a talent for sewing, I am extremely jealous. You can save so much money just by making your own LARP kit. And to be honest, you could probably even make money by making LARP kits for others. Costume making is a massive business at LARP, and I know so many costume makers who are all exceptionally talented who make amazing costumes for profit. Custom costumes are a massive dream for almost every LARPer, and that means that a lot of us are willing to pay the money for them. However, if you're like me and completely unable to even make a paper plane, then we need a backup idea. The best option is to hit your local charity shops or thrift shops, depending on which one you have in your country. Secondhand clothes are often cheap, decent quality, and you'll be surprised how many of them fit into a fantasy setting LARP, if that's what you'll be attending. Be strict with yourself though. Don't go in without any plan in mind. Have a strong idea of what your character's going to be like and therefore what their costume is going to be like. If you start buying stuff that looks cool but you won't actually use, then essentially that's just money down the drain. Have some flexibility, but do keep that image in mind of what you want. And also keep in mind that there are some things that you're probably not going to be able to find in a thrift store. I've yet to meet anybody who's found a full fantasy cloak in a charity shop. So at that point you can try and make one yourself. Using a plain blanket and a brooch is often a reasonably expected starting point for most LARPers, and if you wear it well, it can look great. If you're looking for something a little bit more professional, have a good scour through Etsy, eBay, Amazon, or pretty much any of the LARPs retailers that you can find online. If you have a low budget, then you need to maximize your value for money. Make sure you do a lot of comparison between the different types of material, what you need, and essentially how much you can afford. There's no point in buying a cheap crushed velvet cloak if you're going to be outside in the middle of winter. You need something that's going to be able to keep you warm. And do make sure you get things that you can use at multiple events. If, for instance, you need a cloak for more than one event, only having to buy one means you will save money in the long run. There are items for LARP that will cost you more money in the initial purchase, but they are worth buying because you probably won't have to buy them again. I have made an entire video of this, so go and check that out after this video. Okay, number 4, your friends are your greatest allies. Your friends are probably your best money savers when it comes to LARP. Why? Because sharing makes things cheaper. You can share the costs of accommodation, for your food budget, and even your travel costs. Especially if you have a very kind and generous friend who is either willing to drive you to an event or split petrol money if you're driving them. If you are sharing things with your mates, make sure that it is a fair trade for both you and them. Ideally split your costs evenly, or you can do it proportionately if you and your mates deem that appropriate. But don't go into this arrangement believing you can pay nothing. When people are doing you a favour, it's only fair to offer them appropriate compensation for their time and resources. It seems obvious, but I will remind you regardless, don't treat your friends badly. In addition, don't treat their stuff badly. Because LARPer friends are often very generous and offer to lend you LARP kit and weapons. Being lent a tunic or a cloak instead of having to buy one yourself generally means you can redistribute your funds into the rest of your LARP event. Now, keep in mind this is unlikely to be a permanent arrangement. People tend to want their stuff back eventually. However, if it's just going to be a game or two, people can be surprisingly kind and generous and are willing to help you out, especially if you're a financially challenged newbie. LARP is not something you have to miss out on if you have a low budget. All you need to do is make sure you are using your money wisely. If you have any questions on this topic that you feel I haven't covered, just pop your questions in the comment section below and I will either answer them right away or I might save them for my live Q&A on the 22nd of November. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe so that you don't miss out on more LARP 101 videos. Please make sure you are staying safe, that you are staying healthy, and I will see you on a battlefield soon.